Okay, so this is to explain the essay questions. First of all, it's really important that your answer have enough specific examples, evidence, and details so that I can um, see that you understand the question and what we're getting at. So make sure you have those things there. So the first question is describe the transport of respiratory gases in the blood. In what forms are oxygen and carbon dioxide transported? Why not just transport these materials dissolved in the blood? What cells, molecules, and chemical reactions are involved in gas transport? Okay, so this is out of chapter 22, the respiratory system. I have a couple really nice PowerPoint slides on these that explain one for carbon dioxide, one for oxygen, I think in the first or second lecture here. Okay, oxygen doesn't dissolve well in blood. Blood can't hold much dissolved oxygen. And so instead, oxygen that dissolves in the blood is quickly sucked up by red blood cells and bound to hemoglobin. And so this oxyhemoglobin carries 98.5% of the oxygen that blood carries. So essentially, the blood is emptied of oxygen until hemoglobin is all filled. Okay, it's simple. The blood can't carry much oxygen. Hemoglobin can hold a lot. Carbon dioxide is a little more complex. Um, in carbon dioxide reacts with water to produce carbonic acid, which dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate. Okay, this naturally happens, but red blood cells contain an enzyme that can make it happen more quickly. Okay, most carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate and hydrogen ions, something like 75%. Okay, a little bit more, another 20%, is transported bound to hemoglobin. Okay, that form is called carbaminohemoglobin. And then the rest is transported as dissolved carbon dioxide. So again, by converting carbon dioxide to other forms, we can carry much more of it and much faster. And so hemoglobin and red blood cells are crucial for this because they can both bind hemoglobin can bind both oxygen and CO2 and then release it when necessary. And likewise, the enzyme in red blood cells, carbonic anhydrase, is really important. Right, then the next question is what controls the activity of the stomach during the digestion of the meal? Does the stomach wait until the food arrives before digestion begins? How does the stomach know how fast to release chyme into the small intestine? Okay, so this in chapter 23, there's a page that shows the phases of gastric secretions. And this is really controlled. The first phase is called the cephalic phase, and that's controlled by parasympathetic activity. Nerve cells ramp up digestion when we see or think of food or hear about food or smell food. Okay, then the second phase is the gastric phase. And as food starts to enter the stomach, receptors in the stomach detect that, and cells of the stomach release gastrin. Gastrin promotes more secretion by the gastric gland, so you get more digestive juices. It promotes more activity of the muscle layer, so you get more mixing. Then the last phase is the intestinal phase, and there is an intestinal gastrin that can speed up again secretion and activity of the stomach, and that's released for a little while. But then primarily, there are hormones released by the stomach that tell the stomach to slow down, release less chyme. And these are secretin and cholecystokinin. They're released by the cells of the small intestine so that the chyme doesn't overwhelm the small intestine. So the stomach doesn't have to wait until the meal begins before it starts digestion. That's why your stomach rumbles at lunchtime. Nerves are getting it ready, and then that's the nervous system is acting, and then later on, the uh, stomach and small intestine produce their own hormones. Okay. Then the last question, describe the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. What is needed for chemical digestion of starch, sucrose, and other carbohydrates? Where does this happen? Explain the importance of carbohydrates as compared to other macronutrients, lipids, or proteins. So mostly the answer to this is in chapter 23, but a little bit in chapter 24. Carbohydrates are the most important source of energy. Okay, they are um, can be used in aerobic or anaerobic uh, breakdown of energy. They can be used by virtually all cells, and they produce waste products that are easy to handle. Okay, just carbon dioxide or water or even lactic acid is easier to handle than ketones and urea. So it's the preferred energy source. Digestion of carbohydrates begins in the mouth with salivary amylase, which starts the breakdown of starch. Okay, but it doesn't go on very long because uh, the salivary amylase is going to be inactive once it reaches the stomach because the pH is too low. And then what's going to happen is digestion will continue in the small intestine when the pancreas releases an amylase that will continue starch digestion. And then it's finished at the brush borders, where just before it's absorbed, disaccharides like sucrose, maltose, and lactose are split by disaccharidases, which are enzymes that cut them in half into sucrose or into glucose or fructose and other monosaccharides. Carbohydrates are easy to digest. We don't need a huge number of enzymes. We don't need bile. They're easy to transport because glucose and other carbohydrates that can be absorbed are easily transported in the blood. And so it's part of the reasons why they're the preferred energy source. Okay, and so insulin, glucagon, these all regulate glucose because glucose is that most important nutrient for energy. Okay, so remember details are important, specific examples, then not just sugars, but if you can say glucose and fructose and lactose and sucrose and starch, and then some evidence. That's all important. Okay, I'll stop there, study hard, and I'll see you on Monday.